Welcome to Cybersecurity Sense, a weekly podcast providing updates and insight into the latest in cybersecurity, brought to you by LBMC Information Security. Now, here's your host.
Hi, I'm Bill Dean, Senior Manager here at LBMC Security. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're going to discuss 5 reasons why organizations don't detect a cyber breach. I hope everyone had a great holiday season, and this will be our first podcast for 2018. This week's podcast is actually inspired by an article I ran across on technologyrecord.com website, actually before the holiday season. The article has some good foundational points that I want to bring up and kind of expand on just a little bit. The article starts out by explaining how we, as incident response consultants, are often contacted by clients that are in complete shock that their systems or their networks have been compromised. Many times, they're hoping that our analysis and investigation will ultimately prove that it was just a flesh wound and they didn't actually experience a data breach. Reason number 1, it's common that organizations assume it won't happen to them and consequently, they don't have a plan. Their assumption is that they aren't interesting enough or their data isn't valuable enough. Maybe there are bigger and better targets, or worst of all, they have security solutions in place, which means they are bulletproof and cannot be compromised. Many organizations pay incident response planning just absolute lip service. They download a vanilla incident response plan from the internet, update it a little bit with their logo and some people's names, put it into a folder on a network share somewhere, and feel good that they are compliant with the latest or greatest cybersecurity framework. Assuming a compromise will not happen is just not a good plan, especially if you're targeted by a talented attacker group with a focused objective after your sensitive data. Not only do you need a pretty customized plan for your organization, you need to test it via incident response tabletop sessions. If you recall, refer to our first podcast for more on this topic, and there'll also be a link in the show notes to the first podcast and actually this article that I'm referencing. Number 2. The second reason in the article was something we covered a couple of weeks ago. Organizations don't fully know where their data is. Most importantly, their sensitive data. It's common for an organization to focus on where they think the data is, protecting with these security controls and processes. However, they are frequently unaware where data has leaked to within a network or cloud services or even personal devices. Organizations that don't know where all of their data is located, or specifically their sensitive data, they're going to struggle to defend it. It's just common sense. They're going to struggle to detect attacks that target it, and they're just going to be unable to respond when incidents do occur, especially if they don't know what occurred against their data. For an organization to be able to detect and respond to a cyber attack, they must have a full and complete picture of where their sensitive data resides in advance. Number 3. Organizations expect that technology alone will detect a breach. I put the intrusion detection, intrusion prevention systems, and SIEM technologies into this category. Many large and sophisticated organizations make the investment into these technologies, but do not ensure that they are properly tuned and located in the right locations and receiving the correct data sources. There have been numerous times that, through an incident that we're working, the organization realizes that the correct network segments weren't being monitored with their IDS or IPS, or critical data sources were not being fed into the SIEM, like Outlook 365 or Office 365. Outside of tuning the technologies, most every organization that purchases an IDS, IPS, SIEM quickly comes to the same conclusion. It takes dedicated and talented resources to monitor these technologies if they want to do something more than just check the box. So when InfoSec consultants say checking the box, that's code for they are making the minimum investment needed into compliance rather than a concern into their actual security posture. Technology alone isn't enough to detect and respond. It requires human intervention and successful processes to act on alerts and to log data to undertake a counteraction when faced with a possible breach of network or systems. As with the target breach, all too often, critical alerts can be ignored. Number 4, the organization has never done any assurance on their detection technologies. The article describes that many years ago, when firewalls were first deployed, organizations trusted that they were secure and assumed they wouldn't be breached. Of course, that's why they made the investment. Over months and years, mature organizations recognized that they should probably test the security of these firewalls to ensure that they're doing the filtering in the way that they expected, both ingress and egress. Through firewall audits and external penetration tests, so organizations gained assurance that their firewalls were delivering the value that they expected. You need to know much more now. This is not 2002 when you do your testing against your technologies. In some instances, clients also inadvertently are testing their MSS providers, but that is about as far as it goes for a lot of companies. We all know that the endpoints and users are what are now being targeted, and much of the information security budgets are being spent there. However, most organizations are still performing conventional penetration tests, but not emulating what today's attackers are actually doing and determining whether or not they would actually be able to detect them. Organizations need to understand the threat landscape and conduct applicable threat modeling in their penetration tests to understand the likely paths and relevant tools, techniques, and practices that threats have been seen to display and use against the organizations. Detect and response assessments should then be conducted to simulate these threats and determine an organization's detection capability. Is your logging and monitoring working? Are you going to get alerts when someone puts a shell on a device? Can they circumvent your antivirus or disable it? Would you even know? Last year, I was actually introduced to MITRE's attack methodology and matrix. So that's ATT&CK. I've been very impressed with how valuable this resource is in emulating known attacker groups and testing the controls to see if you would know if they were there. The framework even has indicators of compromise in the STIX format, which is a compatible threat intelligence transport, for searching the environment for these types of indicators. Based on this awesome work, we are currently developing new tabletop session approaches and augmenting our penetration testing methodology with this framework. More on this in a future podcast, but I'm going to place a link to some additional info on this attack framework in the show notes. Number 5, organizations assume that the threat will look like it's from an external source. Many organizations monitor the external infrastructure effectively, but have poor detection capabilities internally. The expectation is that the threat is external and will look like malicious traffic. In reality today, it is that many threat actors target people, your employees and your colleagues. They compromise their machines through phishing techniques and then move laterally across the network, abusing the inherent trust controls that you've built into your systems or services and your processes. More and more attacks don't look like external threats. They look like internal users accessing systems and services in an abnormal manner, or maybe even a normal manner. If you're not monitoring the internal networks and you have no ability to detect normal from abnormal user behavior, then it's going to be really hard to detect many of the more common threats. So in takeaway, system and network compromises will happen to your organization. You need to plan for it. Once you've planned for it, test the plan, tabletop sessions. You must know where your sensitive data is. I cannot say this enough. Technology alone will not stop the compromises. You must have skilled people and tested processes. In your penetration tests and audits, test your security technologies with how today's attacks are occurring. Match the test to your security maturity level when emulating these current attacks. If you've never had an internal penetration test, don't start with the attack framework. Build your way into that. Don't always assume you know what an attack will look like. Again, this is demonstrated in quality penetration testing attacks. Some upcoming speaking engagements. I will be speaking at C-Scout, the C-Scout conference, the week of February 6, 2008 in Austin, Texas. For those that are unfamiliar with C-Scout, this is the CMS Security Control Oversight and Update Training Conference that's held biannually. I'll also be speaking at InfoSec World 2018 in Orlando, Florida on Monday, March 19th. This is my 4th time speaking at this conference, and I have to admit it's one of my favorites. Great venue and awesome content. We'll have a link in the show notes. My talk will be network compromises. What are we learning to make us better? I don't want to leave the assumption that the C-Scout conference is not an awesome conference as well. However, the issue is that I cannot promote it to many of you listeners because it is an invite-only conference for CMS-related vendors. In closing, thank you for listening. Tune in next week for our next episode. As always, if you have a particular topic you would like to hear in this podcast, please contact me at bdean@lbmc.com. To learn more about LBMC Security and our services we provide, please visit lbmcsecurity.com.